Salzburg's experience, I decided not to do that. So I'm actually basing this, and I'd really like this to be, I'm going to throw some stuff out here. None of these speeches have ever been participatory, so I'd like to get maybe a little joint discussion. I actually am a person that doesn't really do much in 20th century gold. I'm much more of an 18th and 19th century gold dealer. So I wrote a little paper, a little blog about a year ago that's actually on the website, if anybody goes on and looks at it, about why more people don't collect 20th century gold by date. So I'm going to throw some ideas out, and hopefully when I throw out some softballs, maybe somebody will react. Thank you very much.
Take a swing.
So the thesis I have here is that 20th century gold coins are really beautiful from the design standpoint, and 20th century coinage is obviously really popular, as evidenced by Lincoln cents, Buffalo nickels, Mercury dimes, and Walkers. So there's definitely a reason that people have an interest in 20th century coins. So why do more people not collect 20th century coins by date? And my first idea was that it really has never been marketed as date-centric coinage. It's been marketed more as type coins. So why is that the case? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Actually, I'm sorry, just point of clarification. You're saying that 20th century gold or 20th century coinage is not collected by date?
Not
Well,
as
two and a
regularly
half
as
Indians.
other
Yeah, 2.5
series.
Indians.
2.5 Indians are probably more popular than.
That's my asterisk on this.
Okay.
So
And saints to a certain extent, but
Yeah, but you come into the rarities.
yeah, I would actually disagree that to me, saints by date are not nearly as popular as I think they should be.
I agree with that.
Right, but a lot of it has to do with the rarity, because you've got several stoppers in there.
Yeah, the financial
Understood, but
capabilities
there
to
are,
put together.
so my reaction with that would be there are other series with lots of stoppers that people really like. So why are those series popular, and why are people of means still not attracted to coins like saints?
But there's no Lincoln cent that's gonna cost you.
$2 million.
There's a
Yeah.
few Morgan dollars, maybe, but
Well,
nothing
except the varieties, the
Yeah,
steel
varieties,
saints.
but
I mean,
but again, we're talking about dates and mid-march.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not talking about
And I
varieties.
think
Right.
5 Indians are so difficult to grade, and are so,
And
really
so rare,
expensive
and so
that
rare.
people are shy away from it
Yeah.
as a complete collection. It's rare when somebody wants to put a total set together. 10 Indians are popular.
Because
but
they're St.
again,
Gaudens.
if you start getting them in the high grades, they're very expensive.
Mhm.
If
But-
someone's putting a 60, 61, 62 set together, then I think they're obtainable.
Yeah.
But when you start getting into the gem category.
So to me, part of the issue here though has been traditionally marketing.
Coins over 100 grand. What-
And my contention here is that 20th century gold coins have been sold more as an investment over the years than a collectible. So I think that's probably hurt the series from a date collecting standpoint. The one exception to the rule are 2.5 Indians, which a few companies have marketed really well. It's a short series. The stopper to the series isn't really that hard to find. So that series, even though it's a little bit out of favor right now, has actually been, it's proven that 20th century coins can be collected by date. Another point that I make is that the coins, quote, all look the same. That's an issue that I've heard with people that I tried to get to collect saints, as an example, which I mentioned before. I think saints are a really, really good deal right now. And the reaction that I've gotten from people,
What do they mean they all look the same?
They-
Grading?
No, they don't have the same. The 19th century coins look very different from year to year.
because the 19th
Because
century coins
the minting process was cruder.
Right.
right.
By the early 20th century, the minting process became much more sophisticated. Not as much as now, but much more sophisticated than the previous century.
So that's a great point. The sophistication of the coins, the fact that the gold is all basically from one source, as opposed to in the 19th century when it's from a myriad sources. The fact that the coins, particularly before 1838, are essentially handmade, there is more character, more differentiation between the coins, which has traditionally made it easier, and Bob, you could probably agree with this, to get somebody to collect Dahlonega half-eagles by date than, say, Indian half-eagles.
I get fascinated.
They have more character.
Character.
Yeah,
The gold color, the location of the mint
The
mark.
quality of the strike. I mean,
Quality
most
strike.
20th century coins are well made, so it's a little bit more difficult to get somebody compelled to buy a gem 11D 10 Indian than it is that coin in 61 or 62.
Yeah, Doug, I mean, you're an expert in it, and this gentleman, who I don't know probably also, but do you find that the various mints are collected by people from that region of the States, or do you have clients all over the country?
My experiences, and Bob may be different, but like Dahlonega used to be kind of regional, but it's changed. And I have actually considerably more people collecting branch mints from outside that geographic area. They may have gone to college at UGA or UNC, so they have some affiliation with the South, or they have a business in New Orleans or something, but I find geographic location to not really make that much of a difference anymore.
Doug, is there one particular mint that's more popular than another in 19th century gold?
Carson
I would
City.
probably say Carson City is the most popular, with Dahlonega being a close second.
And New Orleans being?
Probably third.
Carson City more because of the mystique.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think because of the size of the coin.
I just think, I think the
20.
story with Carson City is so compelling.
It's
Yeah.
the Wild
That-
West type thing?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, that's,
You can sell a Carson, especially like a 20, you can sell a Carson City 20 to almost anybody, whereas a Dahlonega 5 is a little bit more
Yeah.
esoteric.
You get a
more
horde
sharp
of
point.
Carson City coins, and
It's
they're
another thing is
gone
that
like that
Right.
because there's always a story.
Jamie,
Correct.
do you think it's a Wild West type thing?
well, I can give you the story. I yelled at my father in 1973 for buying government CC dollars for $15 and $30. And after about 5 minutes of me ranting and raving, he just looked up and he goes, "People like CCs."
Yeah, they do.
It's the same as more.
Yeah, it's a really it's a compelling story. The series are really short. There's only 3 denominations, so there's a lot going for Carson City coins that you might not necessarily have with 20th century coins.
And they're almost all low quality too, aren't they?
Well,
Carson City, actually, you can buy fairly common Carson City coins, and not necessarily what you would consider
The gems,
great
I mean,
quality.
gems are rare.
okay, no.
For
In the
non-existent.
70s, almost none. You know.
Right.
In fact,
76,
actually, this
65.
summer, the only known really gem Carson City
Right.
5 just sold for
Yeah,
$520,000.
the 76.
Right, yeah,
76 CC5 that
right.
A lot.
was probably direct from the mint, XOIs for.
Yeah. Also, of course, well, it's true of New Orleans too, but also there's a silver. You know, there's a farm team through the silver coins,
Right.
especially Morgan's.
Right,
Yeah, right.
right. That's sort of like a $30 Morgan dollar can be kind of the gateway drug
Hmm.
to collecting real New Orleans coins.
Yes. You see coin dealers hanging around schoolyards with them all the time.
Another idea that I had for why people don't necessarily collect these coins by date is that there's too much difference in value for barely distinguishable quality. And there are, so my point, so I see a couple of people looking like, huh? So my point is that there are coins that are worth $10,000, or a great example is a 1920 Saint that is a $4,500 coin, $4,000 coin.
85,000.
And your coin was the only 5
Right.
known, and it brought
85,000 plus the
So there's not a lot of examples like that in 19th century coins. Valuations have really compressed in the last few years, where in a lot of series, a coin that's a nice XF45 is worth virtually the same now as an AU50. And there should be, if the coins are graded right, a reasonably decent, appreciable difference in quality. Whereas I think for most novice collectors, they are unable to tell the difference between a 5 and a 6, or a 4 and a 5, or maybe even a 3 and a 5. So when you explain to somebody that there are 20 auction records for 1920 Saints at between 4,000 and 5,000, but this one's $85,000, that to me is a little bit.
But there's only one, none higher, and they can't buy it anyway.
Well, my answer to that would be though that if you covered the grade on that
Right,
coin, you
right.
couldn't really necessarily see
You know, on 5
$75,000
Indians,
difference.
it's very hard for the public to tell the difference between
I think it's
3
actually
and
very hard
5,
for dealers
or even
to.
dealers.
Right.
So the public thinks, you know, gee, this is a 5, what's all those marks? It's an Cuse design,
Right,
you know, they'd rather not collect it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think if the premiums were smaller, you might see more date collecting in 20th century coins. But as long as you have gem quality coins worth 7 to 15 times the multiples of the downgrade, I think that my experience is that confuses people. There's no up-to-date reference work on 20th century coins. Without blowing my own horn, I think I've done a reasonably good job on 19th century coins. JD's done early gold coins. On most gold coins, there are really good updated references. Dave Akers' book on gold coins is a great book, but it's scarce, it's out of print, and it's really outdated.
Right.
And I think if there were a really good user-friendly book on 20th century gold coins, it would be a big impetus.
Jeff?
You're right.
My experience is that having a book to send to somebody really makes a big difference. And having a book that's dated, when was Dave's book, 87? 86. It's a great book, but it's really out of date, so.
They redid it, who's the kid that did it?
It was
terrible.
redone, but
Yeah.
it was not really.
Not by Dave. It was-
Yeah, it just, unfortunately, if somebody wants to get into it, there's just not an up-to-date
Right,
reference.
right.
And there isn't really even much on the internet where somebody can just go on somebody's website and read a lot. I know that, Jim, you guys did the Morse book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're about to update it with,
Right.
So, I mean, so for, at least for Saints, there's something.
That'd be nice if
Bauer's
that could
book
be
too,
expanded
but-
a little to
Right, and so
give
Dave
some
Bowers did,
information
I guess, a book
about
on
the
Saints.
recent
You did a
top
book, you know,
reports of sales.
You guys did a
You know.
book, but there's still just no easy
Somehow give a little more
200-page
information on each point.
reference.
I don't know.
And nobody's
If you're gonna do an update.
yeah, well, we will,
You know.
but it'll mostly be
Dave's
based on
book
your,
covered
Right, I
but
understand.
it's just really out of date. Now, this is a point that, obviously, this doesn't reference 19th century coins, but one of the reasons why 20th century key dates in particular have done so well in the last few years is the inherent sense of nostalgia, where somebody who's 50 years old, who growing up collected coins, had a Whitman book, and was stymied. I remember, well, still to this day, on the odd occasion when I buy a 14D penny or an 09 SVDB, it's still sort of slaying the dragon of that one hole you could never fill when you were a kid. And even though you know there's thousands and thousands of 09 SVDBs, I don't know if it's the sense necessarily for every collector in here, but I know for most of the dealers, there still is, if you buy a gem 09 SVDB or 14D penny or 16D Mercury dime, there's really that nostalgia sense which you don't necessarily get. Nobody was filling holes in a Whitman album with 11D quarter eagles and got
Yeah.
that out of the way. An obvious reason is that 20th century gold coins are expensive. So you can be a reasonably serious player in 19th century coins for $2,500 to $7,500 a coin. That price level doesn't really do much at all in 20th century coins. But that brings up the point, and I just had this pop into my head, why isn't and Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's probably with Saints 25 or 30 different dates that you can buy nice ones for under 5,000.
Yes.
So even though you can't necessarily complete a set of
Right.
Saints, it doesn't seem to me that people who are marketing coins are looking at it. There's a lot that can be done on fairly reasonably priced saints.
Well, you know, the 20th Century Gold actually has done really well in the medium grades, you know, like the 2s, 3s, 4s.
Right, that's the ironic
You know,
thing, is that the collector quality coins have actually done well, partially through gradeflation, but partially just because that's the grade point.
Well, no, in spite of gradeflation, really.
Well, I would say
I think the
because of
price.
gradeflation, though, if you bought an 11D 2.5, 10 years ago in a 58 holder, it might be
Oh,
better than
okay.
that today.
But I'm talking about like 5 Indians and 10 Indians and even, well, maybe not as much the Saints. The Saints
Probably
really
not
have
as much as
stagnated.
Saints.
But the 5 and 10 Indians have done nothing but go up in the last 4, 5, 6 years.
Right,
And a lot of them are double to triple what they were.
right.
And but only in the lower grades. The top grades
Right,
are
anything
really
basically
cheap.
over 3 has been, or
4.
maybe even 4.
Yeah.
And that's generally the jump grade on most of these coins.
Yeah. So the gems are just a screaming bargain right
Great
now,
deal.
especially 5 Indians.
Every time I go through your coins and I see the was it the 30S or 20S10? It's been-
Yeah,
Yeah,
20s,
every
10,
time I
6.
pull that
I
coin,
mean,
go,
what a
"Man, that's good
steal.
deal."
Yeah, but, you know, you just got to
You know,
wait for the right market.
The catalog from my auction last year, where Dave Akers wrote comments that they're gonna publish, really is a good review of the Saint, the date by date Saint.
It is, and to have somebody do that with
For
5s and 10s
fives
would be
and tens.
great.
Yeah, so, someday.
Yeah.
Another point that, as I wrote this, I thought about was that I think more so for 19th century coins, not so much for 18th century, but I think pricing is really hard on 20th century coins. I don't think there's really a lot of accurate pricing information.
Again, you're talking about the very high end, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
For 11S 5 Indians in 62, you just go onto your archives and look at the last 15 that it's sold.
Right.
But there's so much price differentiation between PC coins, NGC coins, high-end coins, low-end coins. It's very difficult to explain to somebody why one Saint is worth 85 grand and another one in the same grade is worth 45 grand.
Right.
And you don't necessarily have that same circumstance with 19th century coins. 18th century or early 19th century coins, there is a pretty broad range, but I think it's pricing to me on meat and potatoes 19th century coins, and maybe it's just because I'm more used to that market, just seems a little easier to me.
I mean, the pricing on the 20P 5 is based on auction records. It sold at Elias for $2,100, and then it surfaced again. Katasi bought it for $45,000, et cetera, and that's $85,000 is what it bought at auction,
Right.
not something that Dave Hall came up with. But
Right, and that's an unusual example, and
It is.
that's a kind of a one-of-a-kind
Right.
example.
How much spread would you find between one of the branch mint coins with original surface versus a process coin done? You know, and, you know, you said there's a lot of differential.
Finally,
I
it
mean,
didn't used to be that much of a difference, but I'm seeing significant difference now.
Percentage.
But it's sort of an instance where now that everybody wants original coins, there's no
Yeah.
more original
It
coins.
used to be that Bob and Jack used to buy that stuff for nothing, you know, 10% premiums or something, right?
Will the process
If that.
coin sell?
You guys were just ahead of your time.
Or will the
Yes,
other-
yes, they will.
what's a process?
They will?
A coin
They
that's,
will.
a coin
Been
that,
dipped or been worked?
Scrubbed.
a coin that's,
Baking soda.
Lost its umph.
Okay.
right, that's lost its count.
Yeah, dipped too many times.
NGC, doctor, what do they call it now?
No,
No,
I
not
don't think you
necessarily.
can ascribe it to one. I think there are plenty of
Both do it.
coins in both services holders.
It's, you know, we talked about this in the car, interestingly, driving over here, that early C and D mint, if you've got an original XF or an AU.
It's worth more than
But-
55 or 58 that's crappy.
Right, but what happened is those coins got graded 35 a lot of times because they would look, oh, it doesn't have wing feather detail. Well, that's how it was struck.
Right.
Okay, and they originally started dipping these coins because then they had full luster. Then they could send them in and get 55s and
Right.
58s out of it. But when they were original and crusty, you looked at it and you go, well, that's a 45. And a lot of those ones got graded 35, 40, 45. And that's
Well,
what started.
the problem is that most of the coins weren't just dip, they were much more.
Baking
So
soda.
this is a
Baking
different
soda.
topic, but to me, there's nothing wrong with lightly, judiciously dipping a coin.
Of course not.
Um,
At some points, maybe.
Right. My last point was that I don't think there's a lot of dealers that I look at on a bourse floor and think, this is a go-to guy who always is going to have a 31D Saint, or always is going to have a Gem 11D Quarter Eagle. There really hasn't, whereas there are, even in this room, I can look at a couple of guys that you know are always going to have pretty interesting 19th century coins. I don't think anybody's really gone out of the way, myself included, to really establish themselves as kind of the beachhead, the go-to guy, like Dave Akers was the go-to guy for really good 20th century coins back in the day. I don't think anybody's really filled that void. There are some dealers that occasionally from time to time will have good coins like that, but there's not a lot of dealers, myself included, who are willing to just stock.
You can't make a business out of it.
Probably not right now, although,
It's a chicken and egg argument.
But I think
right,
there's-
that's what I was going to say, is that maybe if you
As
had
time
that
goes,
coin, you
as
could
time
create
goes on,
business.
and we're dinosaurs, and as we, in 10 years, as new collectors come in, and they start collecting half Benjamin Franklin, half dollar, you know, as time goes on, it's like when we started 30 years ago,
Like I
and,
said,
you know, walkers, and they were talking about barber hats and seated hats, and, you know, so the next generation will want 20th century gold. I think it's a great marketing tool for somebody.
Right.
Mora has some nice 20th century gold occasionally.
From time to time.
Yeah, but no one like Dave Akers
Right,
specializes.
there's just not what I perceive as a
Right.
go-to
Right.
person that you immediately equate
Right.
with the guy that, oh, I need a 32 Saint,
Right.
so I'm going to go to this person's. There's always guys who have high reliefs,
Right, everybody has some.
but there's just not a guy, and there are people that aren't necessarily in this room right now who do, like Kevin Lipton is a guy who I look at as being an amazing expert on 20th century coins, but he's not somebody who's necessarily a retail friend.
He won't stock them.
But Doug,
Right.
isn't the market so thin that, I mean, you could walk this whole floor this weekend and you couldn't put a set of Saints together.
No,
Well, I
From
hope not.
every dealer, I mean, you couldn't put.
Yeah, it's the Saints, try 5 Indians.
or-
You couldn't put a set of
whatever,
good set of 5 Indians, a gem set of 5 Indians together in 10 years.
There isn't anybody that's marketing
the
that
13S
because
you have coming up.
it's not successful. It's
Six.
just
Right,
not
that's
something
kind of
they
like
wanna
you
do.
just hit, that's kind of
Right.
hitting the nail on the head. It's
Tomorrow
kind of a
night, Thursday night.
catch-22 situation.
Yeah, tomorrow
A
night.
young collector now, or you're, let's say 30s or 40s, says, I really love coins. What are you gonna collect? You start with the pennies and dimes,
Well,
nickels.
see, I don't think that's the case anymore. I don't think it's.
I was gonna ask you next. Who is the gold guy that says, okay, I want to collect gold? What do they? They never. I never think of dates. I never think of the dates. I just think of like.
I think there are plenty of guys
Key
who,
dates.
who start out thinking big these days. I don't think there's, back in the 80s, the tradition was a guy bought an MS-63 Ross Saint, and then he graduated to a slabbed 5, and then he started buying the real coins. I think the internet has destroyed all the old parameters. That doesn't exist anymore. I speak to people on a weekly basis who the first coin they've ever bought is a $50,000 coin,
Yeah.
and they have no clue what they're doing.
Right.
I
That's
think
gold.
auctions have changed the landscape of that a whole lot. because,
Hugely.
You know, it's like, you know, you say like inventory is like, you know, I'm not gonna stock a 1920 Saint in 65, but,
Right.
because a coin like that's only gonna bring a nosebleed level when someone has the comfort of an underbidder.
Right.
And it's like when Dave Akers used to have them, you know, sure, it's easy to have a coin that's $5 grand, and you're asking $6 grand, but now it's $100 grand, you
Right,
want
right, right.
Right.
Well, I think, you know, that's a little more risky, so.
Right.
You know, the great coins, you know, they just go to auction and people.
But also, I don't necessarily find that to be the case with early gold and
So the late
pre-1900
stuff,
gold.
especially the 20th century coins, or the, you know, like the St. Gons and some of those things, because, you know, a coin is like, it's so hard to define, like you said, the pricing is so difficult. It's like, okay, here's a St. Gon, if it's like, you know, NGC or something, it could be 3 times times more money if someone perceives it differently. But it almost has to be in a competitive auction environment where someone has a comfort underbidder to bring that humongous money. So it's just, I think auctions just like change the land. I mean, it's changed the landscape a ton in the last 5 or 10 years. And the comfort of just being a dealer trying to inventory. I can't inventory coins that, three guys don't like it, all of a sudden it's worth a fraction of what that is. Right. So it's at those lofty levels.
Right, and the
like
problem
I say,
in the same market is now if the one guy who needs the coin doesn't like the coin or has the coin, there's a big precipitous drop.
Yeah, it's real.
But,
But that's true even in the Delaware market.
I don't think as much.
Oh, really?
I really don't find that to be the case. I mean, if I have a 61D5 and the person that I offer to it passes on it, I don't panic and cut the price 20%.
Right.
Oh, that's what you're talking about.
The set registry is another thing that we'll probably talk about. That's another big factor.
Which surprises me, and the point I was going to make was I really thought that when after your sale, that was going to totally regenerate the same market, and it didn't.
I talked to Laura today, and she said she hasn't found one person who wants to put a high-end Saint set together
Which really,
in the last year. I thought
surprised
my
me.
sale would generate interest in people because, a lot of people bought coins.
and I think it's totally Heritage's fault.
There's got to be a way to market it somehow, You just like Henry Ford when he marketed one at 43 cents.
I think that's what it boils down to me, is that it's just...
Otherwise, no one knows about it.
It's an area to me that's very compelling from the standpoint of collectability. Clearly, the designs are much prettier. I mean, 19th century coins are not really artistic gems. I mean, they're pretty mundane. Although I think early coins are actually, I like
cool.
the designs.
Yeah.
The Liberty Head Gold, I think the designs kind of suck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they really are kind of all the same in a way too. From
Yeah.
even from denomination to denomination, they're
Yeah,
almost the
that's
same,
true.
Yeah.
To a degree.
But they are cool. Maybe
Yeah.
because they're just so old and
You think
almost.
the fact that they look alike though from denomination to denomination, that it leads to a little more type collecting? In the lib versus the 20?
I don't know. I just think that they look like antiques, and the new ones look a little more modern.
Steve, do you find people buying rare saints, not for a collection, not for a date collection, but just because of rarity?
Right now, there isn't. They're not, since I sold my collection, I don't think there's been new saint collectors that have come in who want to put a set
Do you
together.
think it's
No, I'm not talking about a set, I'm talking about rare saints.
Oh,
Is
I don't
somebody
know.
coming in just saying, I
No,
want...
I mean, I think if a 27D Saint came
Yeah.
on the market,
That's
there's
different.
Yeah, there
a
haven't been
good
there
chance
haven't been
that
any for a while.
I mean,
So
that's
Those
like,
are rare.
it's like
Because
the
it's such a
13
cool-
nickel that you're selling, 27D.
Yeah,
Those are people who don't collect saints would buy that.
right.
Or 55D1, Galanaga, gee, I want a trophy coin type of thing.
And I think there are more 19th century coins with overlapping levels of demand than there are 20th century coins. I mean, other than a high relief, there's not a lot of 20th century coins that somebody who's only going to buy one saint, they're probably not going to buy a 21p saint. But they'll buy a high relief because it's a really cool coin with a great story.
Yeah.
And it's been really well marketed.
Well, I'll tell if the government had lost the case on the 3320s, I think
Yes.
that would have been a
That would
really
help. Yes.
a boon
You're
for
right,
the
yes.
Saint market.
I think you're right.
Tomorrow night in Platinum Night, they have a 13S5 and 6, 66. It's already bid at $200,000. There's a lot of interest in it. So there's some people out there collecting 5 Indians because there's an interest.
Or maybe just somebody wants a great coin. I
Yeah,
mean,
well,
who
personally,
knows?
yeah, I know somebody wants it who collects 5 Indians.
Okay. You would know better than us. I have no idea who's bidding. So.
But that was a good talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.